Hi, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bethany with Craft with Bethany, and you are in my new home studio. This is my first time filming a YouTube video in my new home studio. I'm really excited about my space, and I'm set up and ready to do a wonderful tutorial for you guys on how to make a jelly roll rug. Now, if you're not familiar with what a jelly roll rug is, I know that's a mouthful. I'm going to show you right here. I have one that I made for my kitchen. I'm going to try to get it to all fit. These are so fun, so cute. I love all the different colors and prints and patterns, and they're actually very easy to make. However, they do take some time. So I know some people have been a little intimidated to start one of these projects because they are a little more time consuming, but there's only a few steps to making these. It's just each step takes, like I said, some time. All right, so I'm going to show you how to do that today. We're going to make it super fun, super quick, as quickly as possible. And I'm actually going to be sewing up a Halloween themed one for my home. So I'm excited to sew this one, and I'm excited to do it along with you. So before we get started, if you haven't already liked and subscribed to my channel, please do so. Be sure to hit the bell so you're ready for the next tutorial, and let's dive in. Okay, so quickly I want to go over some of the supplies that you need to make a jelly roll rug. First of all, you're going to need a jelly roll. They usually come in something like this. I love the brand Moda. They have very good quality fabric, and they come in these beautiful different colors. I also really like the Riley Blake jelly rolls as well. And this is actually a Christmas one that I'm going to do later for my home. Also very good quality fabrics. They have, the edges are cut. You can kind of see it here. The edges are cut with pinking shears, so it prevents the fraying, okay? These are large rolls, which is what you want. They're 2.5-inch strips, and there's about 40 of them in one of these rolls. Now, there are other places that you can get jelly rolls, and they're going to be smaller, like this. See how it's much smaller? And so if you were going to do the same size rug as this one would make, you would need 2 of these. Okay, so just pay attention to how many. This one says 20 strips, the same width, which is what you want, but it's 20 strips. This is actually a really good quality one that I picked up. I can't remember where I got it, but it also has the little zigzag or pinking shear cuts along the side so it doesn't fray. So this is a really good quality one. I picked up 2 of these to make a second rug, Christmas rug. I'm a little obsessed with Christmas, okay? So I have these 2 that I'm going to make in the future, but I wanted to show you an example of one not to get. This one I think I picked up. Oh, this one came from Hobby Lobby, which they actually have some really nice fabrics. So what I want to show you, though, is these. This bundle right here is fraying really bad. You guys see all of this? This would be an absolute nightmare when sewing this project. And you would have to go through and trim all of these, and then with pinking shears, and then they wouldn't be quite wide enough. So I bought this as an example of what not to do. You could make something small with this and be more manageable. This fabric's also a lot thinner than the nicer fabrics, and so it's not going to hold up as well. And when you sew a rug, you want it to hold up really well. So I just wanted to quickly show you that if you see some like this, just avoid it. They're cheaper, but the quality is not the same. And you're not going to have as a successful project as you would if you would just spend a little bit more money on one of the nicer brands, okay? Or the nicer jelly rolls. All right, you're also going to need cotton batting. They make it pre-cut, pre-wound, and the right size. This is going to be 2.25 inches, where your rolls are 2.5 inches. So you want it to be slightly smaller than the width of your rolls. And of course, all of this is linked in the description below. So don't feel like you have to remember all of this. It's all linked down below. For one of these big rolls, you need 1 of these. Sometimes you might need a little more. If you do and you don't have another one of these rolls, if you have some batting, just cut your own strips. Okay, you can also cut your own jelly roll strips. You do not have to buy them pre-made. You can have your own fabrics. You could do one just out of scrap fabrics. just be sure you take the time to cut the edges with pinking shears, which give it that zigzag. It helps it not to fray, because every cotton fabric is going to want to fray, okay? The other thing that I highly recommend is this little tool right here. And this is going to help us make our roll, these strips into a long padded strip with the batting and turn it into something that we can sew into a rug. So this is definitely a must-have if you want to enjoy this project. It's called Jerry's Jelly Roll Jig. I've linked it below. You can get one on Amazon, or your local sewing and quilting stores usually carry them as well. You definitely want to hold on to these two little plastic pieces too once you get one. You're also going to need a straight ruler, rotary cutter or scissors, and a cutting mat if you're using a rotary cutter, okay? There's also something important that you're going to need, which is denim needles or heavy-duty needles. I've got some denim needles here. I just put a new one in. If you have some universals that are heavier duty, you can use those as well, but I definitely recommend getting some denim needles for this project, because we're going to be sewing through a lot of material to put this together. The last thing that I highly recommend, it's a must-have for this project, is Miss Mary Ellen's Best Press. First of all, this stuff, this linen fresh scent is amazing. Secondly, it's going to help us keep our rug nice and flat as we're sewing it together, because the bigger it gets, the more it's going to want to curl, and you're going to have to stop and take your time to press it. And the last thing you need is a really good steam iron. And today I'm going to be using a Singer Steamcraft Plus steam iron. It's by far one of my favorite, and it's a really cute iron. So, all right. All right. So now that I've gone through all of the supplies, and remember, everything is linked below in the description, let's get started sewing, because like I said, this does take a little while. So we're going to dive right in. Are you ready? I've got my machine here that I'm going to be using. I've chosen the Singer Heavy Duty 6800C, which is a computerized sewing machine. I really love this machine. You do not need a heavy duty machine to sew this project, but this is a fantastic machine. If you're in the market for something that can literally do it all, this is a great machine. All right, so I'm going to use this one. We're going to set it to a straight stitch at 2.5 millimeters length. And we're going to start by attaching our pieces to each other. So once you open your jelly roll, it's going to look something like this. You've got a lot of pieces, and you're going to want to find the center here and lay it out nice and flat. Okay. There are so many different options here when it comes to the order that you sew these strips in, but I honestly typically like the way that they place them in order. So I don't usually change the order that they're in. Okay, so I just open it up, fold it open, and start with my first strip. And what we're going to do with our first strip, they're nice and long. Okay, so we're going to straighten it out, and I like to lay it up on the machine. So let's get a little closer. All right, so I have one end of the strip, and you may have some selvage ends. That's okay. We do not need to take the time to trim these off. We're going to trim them off after we sew them all together. So there's no need to do it beforehand. All right. So we're going to take our first strip and our second strip. You can see it's got a little bit of a selvage edge here. And we're going to line these up selvage to selvage. I want my selvage to hang off the end. So they're at a 90-degree angle. They're overlapping, right sides together. So the first one, the one on the bottom, is facing up, right side up, and then the one I'm attaching to it is right side down. Okay, so that's where we're at right now. And I've got a little overhang on both sides to account for the selvage. Now we're going to take our fabric and rotate it. And we are going to sew from this corner to this corner, straight across, a straight stitch. When I get to the other end, I'm going to leave my needle in the down position, You do not need a back stitch at the beginning or end. All we are doing is piecing, or what's called chain piecing, these together to make one long strip. So now I have this top piece that I just sewed onto the first piece. So now I have two pieces sewn together. And I'm going to take this top piece and I'm going to scoot it all the way down till I find the other end. And I'm going to flip that end over. Then I'm going to take my third piece, which is the next piece that's on the top of my stash here. And I want to make sure I know which side is right side up. This one's a little tricky, but I'm going to look at that selvage. This is the right side up, so I'm going to flip it over and put it right sides together, just like before, just like that. Then I'm going to rotate it clockwise to the right, and I'm going to just slide it so that the corner is lined up to go in there, and we're just going to keep sewing. There's going to be a few stitches in between this first two that we sewed together and then these two that we're going to trim when we're done, but this is just called chain piecing. This is making it efficient. It's saving thread and time. So let's keep going. Leave my needle down. Find the other end. Now this is the wrong side, so I'm going to flip it over like that. I'm going to find my next piece. Love this print. It's fun to see all of them as you go through and piece them together. And I'm going to lay them just like so. Turn it. And we're going to keep stitching. Now, when it comes to thread, I am using just a 50 weight cotton thread. You can use 40 weight or 50 weight, that's fine. We are just piecing this together. You technically don't need your heavy duty or denim needle in the machine right now, but I went ahead and put it in so I wouldn't forget to do it later. It won't hurt anything. And I went ahead and put in my black thread, which is the color I want to use on the top of the rug that's going to be visible. I just went ahead and put that in, but this part, you're not going to see what the thread is. So if you want to use white or something else, it's fine. And save your decorative thread like that matches for when we get to that part. You can do that. I did not mean to cut my thread. So I did. I hit the wrong button. I love my computerized machines, but there are quite a few buttons. Look at this adorable candy corn. This is going to be the cutest rug. I cannot wait. If you don't follow me on social media, you need to. Like on Instagram, especially, is where I post a lot of content. It's probably my main focus for social platforms. And I did a jelly roll rug with that was Halloween themed for my sister-in-law for her birthday. She loves Halloween. So and her birthday's at the end of July. So I made her a Halloween jelly roll rug for her birthday. And I'm pretty sure she's already got it displayed out in their home early, which is fine. I love that she loved it so much. It makes making these so much more enjoyable when you gift them. But anyways, that one is super cute. It's the same color scheme as this one, and it's from the same brand, which is Moda, and I've linked it below. But it is a little more obvious Halloween, if that makes sense. Like this one's like subtle Halloween. Like it's a lot of florals and patterns and dots and stuff, but the same color scheme. Hers has like ghosts and spiders and spider webs and like true Halloween. And it's so cute. Got like black cats and everything. I'm obsessed with it. I kind of wish I had kept it for myself, but it's perfect for her. So I'm glad she loved it. All right, so I'm going to just keep sewing and working through my stash here. This is going to take a little bit of time, and it will go a lot faster if I can move the camera out from in front of my face because I'm trying to sew around it. So I'm going to shift it over and I'll time lapse this so you guys can see me sew all these together. Okay, so I have sewn all of these strips together, and I'm going to try to find one end. You kind of find where I stopped. It's probably the easiest place to start. All right, so this is where I stopped, and I'm going to take my scissors, and I'm just going to clip the threads in between to separate the strips where I sewed them together. Now that I have found the other end, I'm going to find my first seam right here. I'm going to move all of this out of the way and just work with this one seam. And what I'm going to do is trim off the excess. So here's my strip going this way. Here's my strip going this way. So obviously I don't want to cut those. I want to cut this excess off. This is why I said you didn't need to pre-cut the selvage off, because we're going to do it right now and it would have been a waste of time. You want to leave somewhere between 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch, something like that. You want to leave a little bit past your threads, okay? You do not want to cut too close to your threads. It weakens the stitch. So you want to have some seam allowance. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through, and after we cut them, I like to just kind of quickly finger press them open like that. Once we're done doing this to all of the strips, and we get to the other end, we're going to go to the iron and steam press this open. And we're going to press the entire strip to get any wrinkles out. Like I get some wrinkles in these strips from where they were folded and rolled up. And I need to get all of that out before I start making the next step. So once you get done trimming the seam allowance excess off, take it to your iron, press your seams open, and press the entire strip. And when we're done with that, we'll meet back here to go on to the next step, which is step number 2. Okay, so you have finished step 1, which is attaching all of your pieces to each other. And we have pressed it all. Now, when I press it, I kind of fold it back on itself so it's not tangled and twisted. I'm sure as you were pressing, you saw that it can get twisted very easily. So I highly recommend taking the time to fold it, kind of not press it hard. I mean, you don't want to put wrinkles in it, but just fold it back and forth over itself. So that you have a nice, smooth transition to make the next step. So the next step, okay, is you're going to need, obviously, your jelly roll fabric that you just stitched together. You're also going to need your Jerry's jelly roll jig. So we're going to need to get that out. And you're going to need one giant roll of cotton batting. Again, all of these things are linked in the description below. All right, so let's go overhead. I'm going to show you how to get this started. The next step is turning this into essentially a rope, so that when we go and sew around and around and around, we are sewing this rope. So this is going to only be as wide as one of these, like right here. Okay, so I want you guys to see what we're going for. I think it'll make more sense. So I hung it over my mannequin over here. But let's start piecing this together in step 2. And I actually really like this step. I find it satisfying, but it does take a little bit of time. So let's jump right in. So as I mentioned, you're going to need these 3 things to begin step 2. What we're going to do is unroll this a little bit. We don't need a whole lot, but we do need some to get started. And we're going to line up our one end of our jelly roll here. I can't use my words today. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut off this selvage edge. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm just going to go ahead and cut that off. All right. I'm going to line up my batting with my fabric. And as you can see here, I'm going to make sure I'm in view for you guys. There is a little gap on the sides here, so we want to keep this batting centered. I'm not starting right on the edge. I'm leaving a little bit of space here. And we're going to take this tool here and these 2 pieces of plastic. Now on this plastic here, there's a smooth side, and then there's like a rough, not like a dull side. you want to put the dull side down like this on top of the fabric, and then again touching the fabric on the other side. So you want the dull side, it's a little rougher, and it helps kind of grip the fabric like a sandwich. Okay, and then we're going to take our tool, and it goes like this, okay, in your hand. So you're going to slide this in through the bottom here, just like this. Can you guys see that? Yeah. And your fabric should go in just like so. And it's helping feed the fabric through the jig here. And we're just going to reach through and grab it on the other end until we get to where the plastic can come out. Obviously, this is just to get it started so we can set the plastic off to the side. We're done with the plastic now. And what we're creating here, what this jig is helping us do, and why I highly recommend it for these projects, these jelly roll projects, is it's creating this perfect fold where these two edges meet in the middle. And then we're going to fold it in half again with our hands. So as we pull this, and you want to make sure that your batting stays center on your fabric. That's really important. But as we continue to pull, we will fold just like this, and fold and fold. And then where it's folded along this edge is where we're going to sew a straight stitch along here. If you haven't put your denim needle in your, or heavy duty needle in your machine yet, you definitely need to do that immediately. It's so helpful with this process and having a successful project. All right, so that's where we're going to start. We're going to start here, and we're going to sew all the way down. Now, you can't start at the very edge here when you're sewing this. It's too bulky, so start in a little bit, and then back stitch towards it, and then come back into it, okay? And then another tip I'm going to tell you guys real quick, and I'm going to grab my clips, is I've got some fabric clips right here, the quilting clips. If you are a new beginner sewist and you're not as comfortable with sewing projects yet, this is a great first project or second or third project, really, because it's a very forgiving project. It hides a lot of mistakes if you make them, okay? But one thing that you might not be comfortable with yet is how to hold and maneuver fabric while sewing. And in this situation, you really have to hold it in this position while sewing it, and then stopping and readjusting, making more, and keep going. And it can be a little cumbersome if you're not comfortable doing that yet. So I recommend getting these clips and putting clips on the fold here. So you can go through and put clips down. And that way it holds it until you can sew until you get to that clip, remove the clip, and then sew. And this just takes more time, but obviously it's going to make it easier for people who aren't comfortable with handling all of this. And you can go through and clip your whole thing. You can clip all of this before sewing it, or you can clip as you go while you're sewing, or you can be like me and skip the clips. And you just go straight to sewing, and you just make it as you sew, which is what I'm going to do for time. And I'm going to show you how I do that. Okay. I'm going to clip it just to hold my spot, but let's go over to the sewing machine. Now, I said we were going to go over to the sewing machine, but I was just kidding. Before I do that, I want to explain to you that you're going to have a roll of batting, and you're going to have all of this fabric to manage while you're creating this row. And it may seem like a lot, but I'm going to tell you what I do. I put them on the floor. That's why I fold this like this, so it can just lay on the floor to my left. And then this will either be to my right, or I usually kind of keep it in my lap or in between like my knees here, so that it doesn't get twisted, and I can control how it comes off of here. If it gets twisted as it's coming off, it's a pain and it's super frustrating. So keep an eye on that. This, because it's folded, it just lifts right up and it doesn't get twisted. So definitely take the time to fold it like this. And you can place it down here on the floor, which is what I'm going to do next. And then we're going to start sewing. All right, so for this part, you're going to want to make sure that you have a full bobbin in your machine, which I do, and plenty of thread. You're going to make sure your machine is set to a straight stitch. I like to keep it at a center needle position, but you can shift it over if you want, whatever is comfortable for you. You just want to make sure that it's a straight stitch. I have mine set to 2.5 millimeters in length. You can set yours to 2.5 or even 3. If your machine is struggling to feed this bulky material through it, definitely go up to a 3 millimeter stitch, but it's totally up to you. And I'm going to place this under here. And you want to sew as close to this edge where the fold is, as close to this edge as possible. You want to really capture both the top and the bottom, and you want to make sure that the top and the bottom stay in alignment right here. So let me find my foot, and we're going to start sewing. Now, when I get to a point where my fabric needs to be folded a little better, I'll stop. I hold it with my left hand, and I kind of hold it down with my right hand, and I feed it. Okay, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to make more of this with my jig. This jig is going to stay on until we get to the other end of our rope. Okay, so you're just going to keep pulling it back and using your fingers. I find that if you just kind of run your finger down through the center of that fold, it'll just fold over for you. There we go. So I'm guiding it with my left hand. I'm holding it tight with my right hand. Okay. Does it have to be perfect? No. Does it need to be sewn shut? Yes. If you get to a point where you didn't catch both sides and it's open and it's, not closed shut, you definitely need to go back. You don't have to rip anything out, just back stitch so you secure your stitch, and then go back and back stitch, sew it shut, back stitch. So you can go through and fix anything like that. You may need to seam rip a little of the before and after just to get it to close better. But again, you don't have to rip out the whole thing. You can go through and patch up spots, because remember, this whole thing's going to get sewn together on itself. So like I said, it's a very forgiving project if you make mistakes. I'm just going to keep going. And you don't have to pull it back very far. You can just do a little at a time. I think once you get going and get more comfortable with it, you'll do more as you go. Once my jig gets to this point, I want to stop. I don't want it to get all the way up to here. First of all, it's not going to be folded pretty. It's not going to give me enough room to work with the material. So stop when it gets to here, because it's going to put tension on that. Okay, so I have made it to the other end of my rope or my fabric to make my rope. And you can see I've ended here. This is all I have left of the roll. So you don't end up with a whole lot left. There was one rug that I made where I ended up using this whole roll and I needed a little bit more. So I wanted to show you or just explain to you what to do if that happens. Let's say we ran out right here and we still had more to sew. I would just butt the two ends of the batting right up next to each other and continue to pull it through the jig here, and just I don't even bother sewing them together. You don't want an extra bulk here, and this batting is kind of thick. So just butt the two ends together and then just carefully hold them together until they get through the jig, and they'll fold and stay in place, and then you can just keep going. But for this, I've trimmed off the selvage at this end of my fabric, and then I am going to trim this about 1/2 inch or so, closer to 1 inch, short right here. So this just kind of closes up nicely on the end. And so we are done with this. Don't throw this away. Save it for the time that you need a little extra, so you don't have to cut any or start a new roll. So definitely save what you have left over if you have any. All right, so to finish this off, I'm going to continue to sew. I'm going to kind of do this from an angle so you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm going to keep pulling this. and folding and stitching. And you're basically going to work the jig right off the end. All right, so I'm going to hold this spot here and just pull this right off and let this fold over just like that. Back stitch. And then I'm good to go. I can trim my threads and we're done. I did not fold this over. I left it open. This is going to be the end of my rug. So this little extra is going to help me kind of tuck it in up underneath when I get done sewing the whole rug like that. So that's why I left a little extra there. And now I have finished all of my rope. It's all down there on the floor. So the next step is to roll it into a ball. Okay, so as you can see here, I have all of this rope that I just sewed. It took me about an hour or so to do that. I go kind of fast, but take your time with this. Make sure you didn't skip any spots. And this is where you can decide what color or what pattern you want to start with. So what I mean by that is I sewed this rug in the order that the fabrics, like sewed them all together in the order that they came in from the jelly roll. I did not reorganize them. So this one, as I've sewn it together, I've realized that it kind of goes from grays to blacks, then to the orange. So my question to myself is, do I want the orange in the middle of the rug and working out to the blacks and the grays, or do I want to reverse that? And I've decided I think I want the orange on the outside. So now that I've decided which end I want to be on the outside, which colorway I want to be on the outside of my rug, it lets me know that this is the end that I need to start rolling this into a ball. So yes, the next step is to roll all of this into a ball. Why do you want to do that? Because this right here is messy. And it would make your life so much more difficult when sewing this all together. And it's already going to be a little challenging, so let's not make it harder on ourselves. So we're going to roll it into a ball, and then we'll work off of that. So just like I folded the fabric earlier to sew it into this, it's just prepping your material to be successful. So mindset, this outside edge is the last thing you're going to sew. You're going to start in the center, which is the first thing you're going to sew. So since this is the last thing you're going to sew, this needs to be the first part you roll up into the ball because it's going to be in the middle of the ball where you end, okay? So I'm going to take the orange and start rolling. Just roll it around my hand. It's going to get twisted again. You want to make sure it doesn't as you go. But just roll it up into around your hand a few times, and then it'll be thick enough to where you can start rolling it into the shape of a ball. So this just takes a few minutes, but I promise it's worth it. See, I've got a little bunch here, and now I'm going to start going this direction around it. And it gets to be a pretty big ball when we're all done. So when I get done, I'll come back and show you that, and we will finish and prep for the last step of making this rug, which is sewing all of this together into this shape. And I'm going to walk you through how to do that. Something to prepare your space. If you do not have a big working space, then you're definitely going to need to move to like a kitchen or dining room table. You want to make sure you have plenty of space. That includes making sure that your machine is not up near a wall. You do not want to be sewing this rug and pushing it into a wall. It's going to distort the shape of it, and we want it to lay nice and flat on our floor like a rug. All right, so in addition to having a big working space out to the side of your machine and behind your machine, you also are going to need to have a level working surface from this level. Well, obviously, this sits up on my table. My table does not meet up to the edge of this. So if you have an extension table to take this off and slide an extension table onto your machine, that's great. That's still not going to be enough. So my trick, and I'll show you this when I get done rolling up the ball here, is putting board games and books around my machine here and my sewing space to build it all, my table, my sewing surface up to this level. You want to do this so that as you build your and your rug grows as you sew it together, it doesn't fold down over the sides. And here again, that will distort the shape. So you want to get this surface built up to this level. If you're one of those really fancy people that has one of the tables where your machine sits down into it and your table meets the sewing height of your machine, lucky you. That's a lot easier than having to build up that space. But it just, honestly, I just use a bunch of board games. I use Monopoly and Scrabble and Battleship and Connect Four and Candyland and all of the classic board games. I also use old textbooks and things like that. So you'll see all sorts of stuff on my desk here in a minute. And that's why, because I want to build up my surface so that when I sew this together, you see how big they get. And you can't even see all, it's just half of it. But as I sew this together, I want to make sure that my surface is really flat. It does make it easier to control it when it gets this big. I promise you, when it gets to this size, you've got that sucker up over your shoulder, and it's kind of a workout. So just be prepared for that, but it's totally worth it. It's totally worth it, and I cannot wait to see this all sewn together. So let me work on this ball, and then I will come back and we will get to putting this together. All right, so I am back. I did not finish this project in one day. I could have last night, but I wanted to spend some time with my family. So I finished rounding off this ball here and put it aside, and we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday. I actually really like this about this project. You know, it's nice that I can get it to a certain point and stop, and then I can come back to it later. So each step has like a really good stopping point. So if you need to walk away, come back to it in a day or two, you can. Some people I know will make a bunch of these and get them to this point, and then they'll set up their workspace to sew these into rugs, because you have to do some stuff to your workspace, as I mentioned before, to prep it for sewing these rugs. Okay, so that might be better if you want to do that. But for your first one, I just say do it from start to finish, get comfortable with it. And then if you really love it, which I know you will, you'll start making a lot more of these. I think this is my 4th or 5th one to make. I can't remember at this point, but I'm obsessed. And I have more to make that I've already bought. All right, so let's get started with this one. Some things that you're going to need for this next step is your Mary Ellen's Best Press. This stuff is liquid gold. And we'll be using that today. You're also going to need a really good steam iron. I pulled mine from my sewing room, and it's the Singer Steamcraft Plus. What I love about it, it's got a nice, really good point, but it's a constant steam. So you do not have to push this button to make it steam. It's just for spots. But as you're pressing like this, it's just constant steam. And so it's really good for this project. And it gets really hot. Like, I don't have to turn it all the way up. I leave it on cotton, and it does really well. Another thing that you're going to need a lot of is bobbin thread. So if you do not have, let me find one over here. You do not have enough bobbins to get you're going to need more than one to sew this whole thing together. So I always like to have a few extras made. But this little guy right here is the Universal Bobbin Winder from Singer. And it's so cute. You just open it up, lift it up, you plug it in, and you put your bobbin on it and your thread on it, and you hit start, and it winds that whole thing up for you. And it has a couple of places to store some extras. It's quite handy, because that way you don't have to unthread your whole machine just to wind your bobbin. Because I have more than one black spool, so I'll just use one of my other ones to make some extra bobbins if I need it. And it just closes up into a cute little case. This is linked below if you'd like to grab one. All right, so let's prep our surface. All right, so I've got a different angle for you here. And yes, you are looking at board games, because remember I said earlier, we need our sewing space to be level with this sewing space. And this is a taller machine, so I need to build up this space so that it keeps my rug, as it grows, pretty flat. It's going to come off the ends a little bit and everything, but you want it to just be very, very limited amount of time. So I pulled out some board games. I find these to be very helpful. when sewing this project. So we're going to line these up. You just kind of have to play around with it till you get the right ones in the right place. Okay, so I have my space set up. I have some like older vintage Singer books, so I use those to build up the space differences. It's not perfect. It's not completely flat and smooth, but it's going to keep my rug at the same height as my sewing area for most of the time that it's being built. I kind of sew through it pretty quickly. I wouldn't just let it hang over the ends like that. But anyway, so we're gonna try this and see how it goes. Okay, so the first thing you're gonna do is take your ball. I tucked mine so that it would not come unraveled, and we're gonna untuck it. And I'm gonna trim a few of my threads here and clean up my end. There we go. And I need to decide how the shape I want to do for my rug. So I'm going to show you what I did for my previous rugs because I really like that shape. It's more of like an oval, long shape. And I find it pretty easy to sew. But you need to kind of know what size to start it at. It's totally up to you. The longer you start it in the center, the longer the rug's going to be, but the more narrow it will be. So to get a shape like this one over here, I think I started with around 17 or 18 inches in the middle. So I started with that, and then that was my starting point. So, all right, so I found that, and I'm going to fold it in half at that point. Now, this ball is big and cumbersome. You're going to want to put this on the floor to your left. Or you can hold it kind of between your feet. Totally up to you. You are going to be using one foot for the foot control. So I typically have it off to the left. It'll roll around a little. It's not a big deal. All right. So we want our rug to grow out to the left of our machine. So that means we need to feed the fabric in from the right. So, all right. So we want it to feed in from the right side. So what that means is as this sews through, you want the tail to be the right, the tail that's feeding into from the ball into your machine to the right. And then that way as you build your rug and turn it, it'll grow out away from the machine. If you didn't do that, it would build up in here and that would not work. So make sure that when you get started that the fold is to the right. Real quick, we're going to change our stitch on our machine. This is the only time you're changing your stitch. This whole time we've been doing a 2.5 to 3 millimeter length straight stitch. Now we need to switch it to a zigzag stitch. So I'm going to select the zigzag stitch on my machine. Some machines have different settings for how wide a zigzag you can do. I'm going up to 7 millimeter wide zigzag stitch. That's the widest that my machine will go to, which I am sewing on the Singer Heavy Duty 6800C today. And for my length, I'm going to 3 millimeter length. I may adjust that, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to stay at that 3 millimeter. I want some space between my stitches, but I want to make sure that it's wide enough so that it'll catch both sides of my fabric rope. Okay. If yours will not go up to 7, it's okay. The wider you can go, the more visible your stitch is going to be, but also the easier it's going to be to catch both sides. I think the first one that I did with this one right here, I think I left it at like 5 or 6 millimeters. So it's totally up to you and your preference and how comfortable you are with sewing it. I think for today, I'm going to do a wider stitch. And if I don't like how it gets going, I can change it. Remember, this is a very forgiving project. Back to the machine, I've set it to my zigzag stitch. I'm leaving the same foot on here. If you would be more comfortable with a walking foot, you can absolutely put a walking or even feet foot on the machine. I'm actually going to start at the fold and I'm going to work my way down, and I'm going to start a little bit in. Remember before, you can't start right on the edge when you have this much bulk. It won't feed under the foot. So how dusty my foot is from all this sewing. Lint from the fabric is getting all over my foot, which happens. So I'm going to start a little bit in and go forward and then back stitch to this point and then come back around. Okay. So now that I'm at this point, I am going to sew almost to the end here, but before I get there, I'm going to stop and put my needle down. And I'm preparing my material. I am actually going to fold this over like this. I am folding it over this end. It'll hide this open raw end, because this is going to be the top of our rug. I don't want to pull too hard that it curls this side up. You want to leave it kind of flat. And we're going to sew up over this real quick. It is a bulky part, so just be patient and take it slow. All right, so I'm going to leave my needle in the down position. I'm going to lift my foot. I'm going to rotate it counterclockwise, so I'm sewing towards this strip here. I'm just going to do a couple more stitches to hold it in place. This is honestly the hardest part of this whole project, so take your time with this. Again, this is a very forgiving project. It doesn't have to look perfect. All right, so now I'm going to tuck this back under here. Okay, so now I am going to have a rounded side to a rounded side, okay? Just this one time. And I'm just going to tuck it, put my foot back down, and continue sewing it all the way to a little past it. And then I like to do a couple of back stitches just to secure this part. All right, so I'm going to leave that in the down position, lift my foot. Now I'm going to bring it back around. All right, so now that my rope is facing towards me again, I'm ready to sew these two rounded sides together. So we're going to keep going. One thing that's very important to know is to not put tension. Make sure there's no tension on the rope coming from the ball. So you may have to stop from time to time and kind of unwind a little bit off the ball. But if there's any tension, it's going to change the shape of your rug. Then you're going to end up with, instead of an oval shape, you're going to have like a kidney bean shape, and you don't want that. So just be very careful. This starting point is so critical to get the shape right so that it grows in that same shape. If it gets off just a little bit, it's just going to be more obvious as it gets bigger and bigger. All right. I'm going to fold it over. And stitch. Leave my needle down, turn it, stitch across, leave my needle down, lift my foot. I'm going to tuck this back under. This time we're going to have a round edge to a sewn edge, okay? I'm going to tuck this back under and butt these two edges together. Okay. Lift my foot, rotate it back around, put my foot back down, and we're going to just keep going. So as I approach my next corner, I'm not going to keep flipping it like that. We only do it at the beginning so that it builds up some depth here, and now we can kind of scrunch it around like this. It is going to get scrunched. That's where the pressing is going to come in handy. And we'll talk about that when we're ready to start pressing. Take your time going around these curves. Don't be afraid to leave the needle down. Lift the foot a little bit and shift it before you keep going. There we go. And you want to make sure that you don't pull too hard that it buckles and curls too much, okay? One thing that I want to point out is where I'm putting my hands. It's going to take some time for you to figure out what you're comfortable with, but I put my left hand on the part that's growing, and I am using that to kind of guide the material and turn it when I need to. This hand pretty much stays in this position right here. Kind of use these three fingers, my my first 3 fingers to kind of guide the rope here to make sure it butts up perfectly with this edge all the way around. I'm not pulling tension on it. I'm just placing my hand on it. I'm not putting a lot of pressure or anything. It's pretty relaxed, but it's going to help keep my material where I want it to go. My eye is staying on the center of my foot here, and that is where I'm lining this gap up in between the center of the center of the foot. That way I'm sure that both sides of my zigzag stitch will catch both fabric. All right, before I get to this curve, I am going to back stitch a few times and take it off of the machine. All right, so we have made some progress. It starts taking shape right away. Honestly, getting around those first couple of curves is the hardest part with like folding it over on itself, but you want to do that so it doesn't get bunched up. You'll see with the stitches, it stays pretty flat. But see how it wants to curl a little bit on the ends? That's normal, especially when it's small like this. The bigger it gets, those curves seem so much easier to get around. But this every, I don't know, how many rows have I done? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I don't know, every 9, 10 rows, you're going to want to stop and take it to your ironing board. Use your Mary Ellen's Best Press spray and spray it really good. You want to do right side facing up, so the top side facing up. And you know it's the top side because you can see where you started on the bottom, okay? But top side facing up, you're going to spray it and press it really, really well. And you do want to really kind of work out those edges. I don't know if you can hear or see the steam coming up, but it really is a good iron. I'll link it in the description below. Typically, I do this on my ironing board. I'm using an ironing mat on my desk today for this part. As it gets bigger, I'll probably stop off camera and go take it to my big ironing board where I can press it. A little easier than in here. By the way, this stuff smells so good. So, so good. You want to press it for a while to make sure it's really smooth and flat, and then you want to let it sit there until it cools. If you were to pick this up right now and start messing with it, it's not going to hold that flat shape. You want to let that cool. So we're going to let that cool for a minute, and then we're going to take it back to our machine. While it's cooling, take a quick moment to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, and be sure to click the bell so that you know and are notified of the next tutorial. All right, so I have started back up where I left off, making sure to back stitch before I got going to secure my stitches. And we're going to just keep going around. Now you can see I'm getting to the point where it's getting enough in length that I need to kind of lift it up onto my shoulder and hold it that way as I get around this curve and all of the rug is facing this way. All right, so I have stopped. I'm going to do some pressing because I'm starting to get some curl on these ends, and I don't want that to carry on. The sooner you stop and press, the better. Just makes your life so much easier. Now, once this gets too big for your ironing board, it can be a little challenging to iron flat and keep it flat and let it cool. So you have 2 options. You can iron it the best you can on your ironing board and then lay it down on the floor to let it cool and kind of hand press it flat while it's still warm, so that it stays flat. The other option is if you have like a rug or something that you can, or some towels you can put down on your floor and press it on the floor because I'm telling you, when it gets to this size, it's a lot more to manage, and it'll get there quickly. But you do want to make sure that it stays nice and flat. If you're having any issues with any curving, bubbling, curling, anything weird like that, and it's not laying flat, you're probably going to need to take out those stitches. It's where a seam ripper comes in handy. And I've had to do it before. It's not the end of the world, I promise. Just run your seam ripper between those seams, those zigzag stitches. It comes in them pretty easily. You just have to pick out all the threads. And then iron it really good, and then carefully start back and get it smooth. Let's get back to sewing. All right, so I'm going to leave my needle down, and I've got, I don't know, maybe 3 or so inches, 4 inches left, and I'm going to lift up the rug and gently tuck that under. I am not lining the end of this up with here. I'm actually tucking it in a little further than that because I am going to trim this off, and I don't want it to be visible from the edge, okay? So we are going to tuck it just a little. Should be a gradual tuck here. There we go. We're going to back stitch. All right, there we go. That is the end of my rug. I'm going to trim my threads, and then I'll flip it over and show you how to trim the back. All right, so I flipped it over, and here's the back. I'm going to trim my threads. And then I am going to trim this tail. Now, I am using a really good pair of fabric scissors. You're going to need something better than just some snips or kitchen shears to trim this. You're going to need some good fabric scissors. And I'm going to trim it at an angle, just like that. Now, if you wanted to take some hand stitches and just stitch this down, you're welcome to. It stays in place, so it doesn't bother me. I am going to now take this back to my iron, and I'm going to iron this, and you won't even be able to see that at all. We did it. We made this giant jelly roll rug. And I'm obsessed with how this Halloween rug turned out. I hope you love it. I hope you make one for yourself. If not Halloween, any color scheme will do. You can even cut your own strips and make your own color pattern. If you enjoyed this tutorial and learned something new, please leave a comment and give me a like and a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please do so and like that bell so that you're always notified for the next tutorial. We do all sorts of fun things here. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me in my studio today, sewing up something fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time. Bye.